The day I found out my husband sold my late father's Rolex, something inside me broke. It wasn't just a watch. It was the only thing my father left me when he died. A piece of him I had left. But to my husband, it was nothing. He pawned it off behind my back for a secret I never imagined. That betrayal opened doors I didn't even know existed. Hidden inside that watch was a truth my father left for me, one that would change everything. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, drop a comment with where you're watching from. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to the moment I realized my husband's betrayal had only just begun.
My name is Claire Monroe, 32 years old, loyal wife, daughter of a man who built everything from nothing. When he died, he left my sister his fortune, and me just his Rolex. I never minded. That watch meant more to me than money ever could. It was proof that, at least once in his life, my father believed in me. I opened the drawer the same way I always did, expecting to see it waiting there like a quiet comfort. My father's Rolex. The one thing he left me when he died. The only thing I had to hold on to when the world reminded me I was the daughter who got nothing. But the space was empty. My chest tightened. I pulled everything out, scarves, letters, old receipts, but the velvet pouch was gone. My breathing grew faster. I checked the wardrobe, the bedside table, the jewelry box. Nothing. "Daniel," I called, my voice shaking. He walked in, tie loosened, phone still in his hand. "What now?" he sighed. "My watch," I whispered. "My father's Rolex. It's gone." He glanced at me, then shrugged. "Maybe you misplaced it." "I never misplace it," I snapped. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the drawer. "You know how much it means to me." He smirked, leaning against the doorframe. "Claire, it's just a watch. You act like it's a crown or something." The words cut deeper than any blade. Just a watch. He had used that tone before. Every time he wanted to remind me that I had brought nothing into this marriage. Nothing but that watch. I stared at him, searching his face for some flicker of guilt. He didn't even look unsettled. He was calm. Too calm. "You didn't..." My throat closed up. "You didn't sell it, did you?" He laughed low and cruel. "Do I look like I need to pawn trinkets? Stop being paranoid. Maybe check your precious sister's house. Maybe you left it there by mistake." My stomach dropped. He knew how much Emily hated me, how she had gloated when our father's will left her everything. That job wasn't random. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to breathe. If I broke down in front of him, he'd win. He wanted me to look crazy, to look weak. "I'll find it," I whispered, though my voice trembled. "And if you had anything to do with it..." He cut me off with a wave of his hand. "Spare me the dramatics, Claire. It's late. Go to bed." Then he walked away. But I couldn't sleep. I tore the room apart again. The drawers, the closets, the laundry basket. I even searched the trash. My father's watch wasn't just gold and gears. It was the last piece of him I had. Losing it felt like losing him all over again. I sat on the floor, surrounded by scattered clothes and papers, my heart pounding in my ears, until something caught my attention. A slip of paper. Crumple, shoved deep into the pocket of Daniel's jacket hanging by the door. I pulled it out with shaking hands, smoothing the creases. "London Gold Exchange. Rolex. Sold." My breath hitched. The date was 2 days ago. My husband hadn't just lied to me. He had sold my father's Rolex, and I had no idea what he'd done with the money. The next morning, I didn't waste time. I dressed quickly, slipped the pawn slip into my purse, and took a cab straight into Camden. My hands shook the entire ride. My mind kept replaying Daniel's face when I'd asked him. That smug smirk, that careless laugh. Just a watch. The shop was small, tucked between a bakery and a charity store. The bell above the door jingled as I pushed it open. Inside, it smelled of metal, dust, and stale perfume. Glass cases held rings and necklaces, watches lined up like soldiers waiting to be chosen. The man behind the counter looked up from his paperwork. His eyes flicked from me to the slip in my hand. I slid it across the counter without speaking. He frowned, adjusted his glasses, then disappeared into the back room. My heart thudded so hard I thought I might collapse. When he returned, he was holding it. My father's Rolex. My knees almost gave out at the sight. "I'm here to buy it back," I said quickly, voice tight. "It was sold without my permission. How much?" He hesitated, turning the watch over in his hands. "This came in recently," he said slowly. "Man in a suit. Said it was his. Paid cash, no fuss." His eyes narrowed. "You're saying it was stolen?" "It wasn't his to sell," I whispered. My throat burned. "It was mine, my father's. Please, tell me how much." He tapped his fingers on the counter, then finally sighed. "Wait." He pulled out a small tool, unscrewed the back of the watch, and tilted it under the light. His brow furrowed. "That's odd." I leaned forward, pulse racing. "What is it?" He slid a tiny, folded piece of paper across to me, browned at the edges but still intact. "This was inside the case," he said. "I didn't notice before, but it looks important." My hands trembled as I picked it up. The paper felt fragile, like it had been waiting years to be opened. I unfolded it carefully, my eyes locking onto the handwriting. I knew it instantly. My father's. I unfolded the fragile paper, my hands shaking. My father's handwriting leapt out at me. "Claire, if you're reading this, it means they left you with nothing. They will laugh, they will call you weak, but remember, this watch is not just a watch. It's the key to what I left hidden for you. Trust no one but the solicitor I named. He will show you what truly belongs to you." My stomach knotted. My father had known. He knew they would strip me bare. The memories slammed into me, the day of the will reading. Emily sitting smug in her designer coat, crossing her legs like she already owned the world. Daniel beside me, pretending to be supportive, squeezing my hand like I was a child. The solicitor's voice was flat, but his words carved me open. "To Emily, I leave the estate, the accounts, the company shares." Then his eyes flicked to me. "To Claire, I leave my Rolex." The room fell silent, and then Emily laughed, loud, cruel, echoing. "A watch, that's all? Daddy really did know you'd amount to nothing." Daniel didn't defend me. He chuckled under his breath like he agreed. That laugh, it still stings. I remember gripping that velvet box like it was air in my lungs while they all stared. Emily walked out with folders of deeds and keys. I walked out with one box, one watch, and the humiliation burning my skin. Now, standing in the pawn shop with my father's secret note in my hand, the truth crashed into me. Daniel had always known I only had the watch. That's why he mocked me. That's why he sneered. "What did you bring into this marriage? Nothing." No, not nothing. I closed my fist around the note. My father hadn't left me empty. He'd left me a secret, a weapon. And Daniel, the man I trusted, had tried to sell it for pocket change. He didn't just betray me, he sold the one thing standing between me and the fortune he never wanted me to have. The night after I found my father's note, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Daniel was beside me, snoring like a man who'd done nothing wrong. I turned and looked at his face in the glow of the streetlight outside. My husband, the man who had sold the only thing I had left of my father. And yet, he slept peacefully, like betrayal meant nothing. The next morning, he strolled into the kitchen as if nothing had happened, shirt crisp, coffee in hand, scrolling through his phone. "You look awful," he said casually. "Rough night?" I wanted to scream, to slam the note into his chest and demand answers, but I held it in. For now. Instead, I watched him. The way he smiled at himself in the mirror, the way he sneered when he spoke to me. It wasn't new. His cruelty had been there long before the Rolex. Whenever bills came, he'd remind me, "If you had anything from your father, we wouldn't be struggling. But you don't. You never did." Whenever we fought, his words sliced deeper than knives. "You're nothing, Claire. Even your father knew it. He left you scraps while Emily got the world." Sometimes he'd say it in front of others, at dinners with family around. I remember one night clearly. Emily boasted about her new car, her new flat, and Daniel laughed. He looked at me and said, "Maybe one day your little watch will buy you something too." Everyone chuckled. Everyone but me. I swallowed the humiliation year after year because I told myself love was enough. I told myself he'd change. But now, with the pawn slip burned into my memory, I saw him clearly. Daniel never loved me. He loved that I was weaker. He loved that mocking me made him feel powerful. That evening, as he sat scrolling on the sofa, his phone screen lit up. I caught a glimpse before he tilted it away. A hotel balcony, 2 glasses of champagne, a caption with heart emojis. My chest went cold. When he left the room, I picked up his phone. The lock code was the same lazy one he'd always used. My fingers shook as I scrolled through his photos. My heart stopped. Daniel wasn't on a business trip last month. He was in a luxury suite, not alone. The woman's face was blurred in the photo, turned just enough to hide, but something about the posture, the hair, the curve of her smile, it was familiar, too familiar. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred, my heart racing. The woman wasn't a stranger, she was someone I knew. I sat frozen, staring at Daniel's phone. The photo was grainy but clear enough to sting. A hotel balcony, 2 glasses of champagne, the blur of a woman's shoulder pressed close to his. My heart pounded. Who was she? I zoomed in over and over until the pixels broke apart. The woman's face was turned slightly away, her hair falling over her cheek. Not enough to be sure, but something about the curve of her chin, the posture of her body, it scratched at the back of my mind like a whisper I didn't want to hear. No, it couldn't be. I dropped the phone and pressed my hands to my face. I thought of every fight Daniel and I ever had, every cruel word. He always told me I had nothing, that I brought nothing into this marriage. He mocked me for my father's Rolex, for being the worthless daughter. And then I thought of Emily, my sister, my rival since childhood. The memories came sharp and fast. Emily stealing my clothes as teenagers, borrowing friends and keeping them for herself, even snatching the spotlight on my birthdays with her loud laugh and perfect hair. She always had more. She always wanted more. The day of the will reading flashed before my eyes again. Emily leaning back, smirking, her hands gripping deeds and documents, while I sat clutching a single velvet box. She had whispered in my ear as she passed me, "Looks like Daddy finally saw you for what you are. Nothing." That same smirk seemed to echo now in the blurred photo. My chest tightened. No, Daniel wouldn't. Not with her. That was too cruel, too disgusting. But I couldn't let it go. With trembling fingers, I dug deeper. His hidden photo album. More pictures. More hotel balconies. A hand with familiar painted nails tapping a glass of wine. A perfume bottle I'd seen 100 times. Emily's signature scent. One she flaunted like a crown. The walls of the room seemed to close in. My breath came short. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some random affair I could scream about and walk away from. It was Emily, my sister. The woman who had taken everything from me since childhood had now taken my husband, and she had used my father's Rolex money to do it. My hand shook as I set the phone down, but the fury inside me was ice cold. Betrayal had always followed me, from the will, from Daniel, from Emily, but now the two of them had joined hands, laughing at me over champagne glasses I paid for. My sister and my husband thought they had broken me. What they didn't know was that my father's secret had just given me the power to break them instead. My hands were still shaking when I put Daniel's phone back exactly where I'd found it on the sofa. The photos burned in my mind, the balcony, the champagne, the woman's blurred face that I already knew too well. My sister. I slipped away before he noticed, holding my breath until I reached the bathroom. I shut the door softly, locked it, and slid down against the cold tile. Only then did I let it all out. The sobs came hard, tearing out of me until my chest ached. I clutched my father's Rolex to my chest, pressing it against my heartbeat like it could somehow steady me. My tears spilled onto the strap, the one thing he left me, and Daniel had sold it to fund this nightmare. The pain dragged me backward into memories I had tried to bury. 16 years old, my first crush, a boy who scribbled poems in the margins of his books. I thought he liked me, until one afternoon I saw him handing those poems to Emily. She smiled, tucked her arm through his, and shot me a look that said, "You'll never win." That had been the story of my life. Emily always took, and I always lost. I buried my face in my hands and sobbed until I could barely breathe. That's when I heard it. Muffled voices through the bathroom door. Daniel's laugh. Confident, casual, cruel. He was on the phone. "She'll never know," he said, his voice echoing faintly. Then another voice joined. Tinny but sharp enough to slice through me. "Emily, my sister." "She never keeps anything, Danny. I always end up with it. Always." Their laughter rose together, sick and intimate, seeping through the door like poison. Fresh tears blurred my eyes, but they felt different now. Hotter, angrier. I pressed the watch tighter to my chest, my father's hidden note echoing in my mind. "This is not all I left you. Trust no one but the solicitor I named." The sobs slowed. My breathing steadied. I wiped my wet face with the back of my hand, my eyes burning with something colder than grief. They thought I would stay here, broken on the floor. They thought I would drown in my tears while they laughed and drained me dry. But they were wrong. Through swollen eyes and a raw throat, I whispered into the empty bathroom, "This won't end with me broken. It will end with them." In that bathroom, tears turned to resolve. Claire was no longer just betrayed. She was preparing for revenge. 2 days later, I stood outside a small office building in Chorlton, clutching my father's note in one hand and the Rolex in the other. The name written on the letter had led me here, Mr. Penhaligon, solicitor. A man I'd never met, yet someone my father had trusted when he trusted no one else. The office was quiet, lined with books that looked older than me. A man in his 60s, with kind but watchful eyes, rose from behind a desk. "You must be Claire," he said, his voice steady. "Your father told me one day you would come." My knees almost buckled. You knew about me? About the will?" He nodded. "I knew he intended to protect you in ways that others would not understand. Did you bring the watch?" I handed it to him carefully. He examined the note I'd unfolded for him, nodding slowly. "Yes, this is his handwriting. And this," he tapped the bottom of the letter, "is the reference I needed." My breath caught. "Reference?"
He pulled out a heavy file from the cabinet, set it on the desk, and opened it. Inside were pages of numbers, signatures, and seals. Your father didn't just leave you a watch, he left you a trust. Hidden, private, only to be revealed when you brought this letter. It's been waiting for you all along. I leaned over the file, my eyes widening. Accounts, assets, property deeds, not scraps, not nothing, a fortune. Hot tears pricked my eyes, not grief this time, but something else. Relief. Vindication. For years, I whispered, they laughed at me. They said I was worthless, that my father left me nothing. The solicitor closed the file gently. Your father was many things, but he wasn't blind. He saw what was coming. He knew who could be trusted and who couldn't. That's why this, all of this, is in your name alone. I swallowed hard, emotions crashing like waves. I thought of Daniel, sneering. I thought of Emily, laughing as she poured champagne. And here, in this quiet office, my father's voice rose again through ink and paper. You were never nothing. The solicitor slid a pen across the desk. I need your signature here, Claire. Once you sign, it's official. Everything transfers, quietly, privately. No one will know until you want them to. My hand trembled as I picked up the pen. The weight of years of humiliation pressed against me. Daniel's cruel smirk, Emily's laughter, the sting of being called worthless again and again. And then I signed. The ink dried on the page, and with it, the power shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't powerless. I was holding a fortune they never saw coming. I left Mr. Penhaligon's office with the Rolex on my wrist and a folder of papers clutched to my chest. The air outside felt different, sharper, like the world had finally tilted in my favor. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying shame. I was carrying secrets. Over the next week, I moved like a ghost. At lunch breaks, I slipped into banks Daniel didn't know I had access to. Quietly, I opened a new account in my name alone, a separate card, a new safety net. Then, with the solicitor's help, I registered a small flat under the trust, a place no one else knew existed. It wasn't grand, it wasn't for show, but it was mine. Back at home, Daniel was oblivious. He strutted around the kitchen with his smug grin, scrolling through Emily's texts when he thought I wasn't looking. He had no idea that while he laughed at me, I was already building a life outside his reach. I didn't confront him, not yet. I smiled when he mocked me. I kept quiet when he told me I was useless, because the truth was mine now, and the longer I stayed silent, the more dangerous I became. Nights, I lay in bed with my back to him, listening to his steady breathing while I traced the edge of the Rolex against my wrist. Every tick of the second hand whispered, "Patience, patience." One evening, I sat across from Mr. Penhaligon again. He spread another set of documents on the table, his expression thoughtful. "Claire, there's something you need to know. Daniel has been funneling money from his company, personal expenses disguised as business ones. Luxuries he can't afford on his salary. He's reckless." My heart hicked hard in my chest. "You mean fraud?" The solicitor nodded slowly. "Yes, and if the auditors look closely, it won't hold up much longer. You don't have to lift a finger. His ruin may come on its own." I leaned back, breath catching. The image of Daniel and Emily clinking champagne glasses filled my mind. They thought they were untouchable. They thought I was powerless. But now, I smiled faintly for the first time in months. Not because I forgave, but because I finally understood. Revenge didn't have to be loud. It didn't have to be messy. Sometimes you just had to wait for the cracks to spread. I walks out of the solicitor's office knowing Daniel's downfall might already be ticking like a bomb, and all I has to do is stay silent and watch. Daniel and Emily lived loudly, as if money could erase guilt. Their Instagram pages gleamed with balcony selfies, cocktails in crystal glasses, and hashtags about living your best life. They wore their betrayal like a crown, and for a while, people clapped for them. But then the shine began to dull. The hotel trips grew shorter, the gifts smaller. Bills piled up quietly on the kitchen counter. Daniel's laugh got tighter whenever the post arrived. He brushed it off, saying things like, "Just business delays, nothing to worry about." But the shadows under his eyes told another story. And people noticed. At family dinners, cousins whispered about how Emily's new car was suddenly on hold. Friends stopped tagging them in group outings. Invitations to weekend trips dried up. Everyone could smell it. Something was wrong. Through it all, I stayed quiet. I still cooked dinner. I still smiled politely when Daniel mocked me. But in silence, I was watching the cracks spread wider. Every day he came home a little more irritable, snapping at small things, his shoulders tense as if he was waiting for something to collapse. One evening, as he sat scrolling through his phone, I slipped into the living room wearing the Rolex on my wrist for the first time in months. The gold glinted in the lamplight, catching his eye. His head snapped up. For a second, his face drained of color. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. He just stared. I tilted my wrist casually, as if it meant nothing. "Oh, this old thing," I said softly. "I thought I'd wear it tonight." His eyes narrowed. Where did you get that?" I smiled faintly, refusing to break his gaze. "Funny thing, Daniel. Some things don't disappear as easily as you think." The silence between us was thick, suffocating. He didn't laugh, he didn't sneer. For the first time in years, Daniel looked at me with something I had never seen in his eyes before: fear. When I slipped that watch back onto my wrist, I saw it in his eyes: fear. He didn't know how I got it back, or how much I knew. And I wasn't about to tell him. Daniel waited until we were alone to finally snap. His voice cut across the room, sharp and trembling with something he was trying to hide. "How did you get it back?" He pointed at the Rolex on my wrist, his hand shaking just enough to betray him. His eyes were locked on the watch like it was alive, like it might speak the truth he didn't want to hear. I leaned back in my chair, calm, too calm. "This old thing?" I tilted my wrist under the light. "It never really left me." He narrowed his eyes. "Don't play games, Claire. I sold it. I know I sold it. How the hell is it back on your wrist?" For the first time in years, I didn't stammer, I didn't defend myself. I smiled, just a small curve of my lips, no words. Silence became my answer. His jaw clenched. "Who gave it back to you? Did Emily?" He stopped himself, biting down on the name. My silence widened the crack. I watched the flicker in his eyes, the way fear started to seep in where arrogance used to sit. He paced the room, running his hair through his hair, muttering under his breath. I kept my gaze steady. Every tick of the Rolex on my wrist felt like thunder in the silence between us. Tick, tick, tick. My father's gift, my secret weapon. He spun back toward me. "Claire, I swear, if you're trying to set me up..." I laughed softly. Not loud, not cruel, just enough to rattle him. "Daniel, why would I need to set you up? You do that well enough on your own." The color drained from his face. He stormed out, slamming the door, but I could hear him pacing in the hallway. His fear was growing. He didn't know what I knew, or how much, and I wasn't going to tell him. Let him squirm. That night, I heard the cracks spreading wider. From the kitchen, muffled but clear enough, Emily's voice hissed through the phone. Angry this time, not sweet. You promised, Daniel. Where's the money? You said it wouldn't run out. His reply was sharp, panicked. I'm handling it. Stop calling me like this. But Emily wasn't letting go. Her voice rose. You're lying. You always lie. Do you think I don't see it? The bills, the letters, you're finished and you're dragging me down with you. I sat in the bedroom doorway, listening. A quiet smile tugged at my lips. They had built their entire affair on my humiliation, on my father's Rolex, on the belief that I was powerless. But now, they were turning on each other. Emily's voice broke through the walls, shrill and furious, and for the first time, Daniel wasn't mocking me. He was terrified of her.
The house grew colder with every passing day. Daniel hardly looked me in the eye anymore. When he did, I could see it. The flicker of panic, the way his jaw tightened whenever the Rolex glinted in the light. He stopped mocking me. He stopped laughing. Instead, he snapped at small things. The kettle not boiled fast enough. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor. But it wasn't me he was angry at. It was himself. Emily's calls became constant. Sometimes I could hear her shouting through the phone, her voice shrill and cutting. You lied to me, Daniel. You promised me we'd have everything. Now there's nothing left. One night, I stood in the hallway while he slammed the phone down, his face pale and wet with sweat. He didn't see me watching as he poured himself whiskey with trembling hands. Their perfect facade was dying. No more vacations, no more champagne posts. The whispers in the family grew louder. Everyone noticed Emily wasn't showing up beside him anymore. And she didn't. She stopped coming around. She stopped answering. One morning, I found her perfume bottle missing from the bathroom shelf where she'd once left it boldly, like a trophy. She was gone. Daniel spiraled. He called her over and over, his voice breaking, begging into the phone, before hanging up in silence. He drank more. He shouted at the walls. But he never shouted at me again, not once, because he saw it in my eyes. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I didn't even ask why. I simply moved through the house like a shadow, silent, untouchable. And with every day that passed, he shrank smaller under the weight of his own choices. On the final night, I stood in front of the mirror, the Rolex cool and heavy in my hand. For months, it had been hidden, stolen, pawned, mocked. But now it was mine again, brighter than ever. I slipped it onto my wrist slowly, deliberately. The gold caught the light, and for a moment it felt like my father was standing behind me, watching. Daniel staggered into the room, eyes red, shirt wrinkled, a shell of the man who once smirked at my pain. He opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't let him. I turned, met his gaze, and walked past him without a word. With the Rolex ticking against my wrist, I left him there in silence, broken, alone, and powerless, knowing my revenge was complete. I left the house with nothing but a small bag, the Rolex ticking against my wrist, and my father's words echoing in my head. For years, I thought he had left me with scraps. For years, they made me believe I was worthless. But now, with the trust secured and the life of my own waiting, I finally knew the truth. He had seen me. He had protected me in the only way he knew how. My new flat was small, quiet, but it felt like freedom. I woke up to silence that wasn't suffocating. I made coffee in a kitchen no one sneered at. I sat by the window and watched the world move without waiting for someone else's approval. I was free. Daniel didn't follow me. He couldn't. By the time he realized I was gone, the solicitor's work was done. The trust was locked in my name. His fraudulent expenses had been flagged. His reputation, once the mask he wore so proudly, began to crumble piece by piece. And Emily? She vanished. Without the money, without the show, she had no reason to stay by Daniel's side. I heard through whispers that she was living with another man now, far from the spotlight she once stole from me. The sister who had always gloated, always grabbed, was left with nothing but silence and shame. I never confronted them. I never raised my voice. I never posted a thing online. My revenge was quiet, steady, patient, and it destroyed them more completely than any screaming match ever could. Sometimes, when I slip the Rolex off my wrist at night, I hold it in my palm and smile. Not because of its value, not because it unlocked a fortune, but because it proved my father knew me better than anyone else did. He knew I was stronger than the world gave me credit for. I was no longer the woman mocked for bringing nothing into a marriage. I was no longer the sister left with scraps. I was free. I was healed. I was enough. And Daniel and Emily, they had each other once, but in the end, all they had left was the bitter taste of their own betrayal. If you thought selling my father's Rolex was the worst betrayal, wait until you hear the story of a woman who returned from a business trip, only for her 8-year-old daughter to whisper, "Mommy, I have another mommy, but it's a secret." Make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. And drop a comment with where you're watching from. I read every one of them.